Hello, everyone. My name is Ed Jurkovic. I'm a program manager at the Pulte Institute for Global Development, and I'm here today with Professor Neeta Verma. Neeta, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing very well, and Neeta is one of our fantastic faculty fellows here at the Pulte Institute. And as part of our new Faculty Fellow Friday series, we'd like to ask her a few questions to spotlight her work. Are you up for it, Neeta?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, great. We're going to go ahead and start right away then. First, can you introduce yourself for us?
I'm Neeta Verma. I'm a faculty associate professor in visual communication design in the Department of Art History and Design. We sit in the College of Arts and Letters.
Great. What is your area of expertise, and specifically then, what is your focus within the Pulte Institute domains of thematic focus?
So my areas of research and teaching focus on social design, where design is used to address social inequity, and visualization of data, which is basically, trying to understand how to represent concepts and visual representation of numbers. The areas of focus, thematic focus within the Pulte Institute for me are sustainability and global health, both of which speak to social equity in the long run.
Great, thank you so much. We often ask this question just because it shows the wide variety of skills and backgrounds that our faculty fellows have and the people that we get to work with in the Keough School. But so our question is, do you know any other languages?
I speak Hindi and Urdu, and Hindi is my mother tongue. So I could say मैं हिंदी बहुत अच्छे से बोल पाती हूँ, and I also speak Urdu because I come from the northern belt where the Muslim influence and the Muslim reign was very long, and therefore it has left a lot of cultural ramifications both in food and language. So I speak Urdu, which is मैं उर्दू का बहुत इस्तेमाल करती हूँ.
What would be one thing you think students would be surprised to find out about you?
What my students may not know is that I have a very strong background in economics and psychology. And it was economics that I was going to be pursuing for my graduate work before I discovered design.
Great, that's fascinating. And I think it is true of many of our faculty fellows that their path is a little different than what people normally think of as like a linear career progression. Neeta, can you tell us please, what are the readings that inspire you or have influenced you and your work?
So the person whose work has really influenced me is Roland Barthes and his writings. He was a literary theorist, a structuralist, and semiotician. And while he's working within the realm of language, it becomes pertinent to us, for those of us who are doing visual communication design, is because we are using visual language just as he's putting out theoretical frameworks for language. And one of the most significant contributions is how he defines the role of the reader, very much like in design, how we respond to the user. The reader was never a consideration, but it's Barth's work that has brought the reader front and center. And from a passive role, the reader has become a very active participant in the theory. For us, it has been very similar in design, that till now we had designer gods, just as Barthes talks about author gods, right? We have now understood the richness and the importance of the user in the process, that when we design, one of the most important considerations that we need to have is that of the user.
Great, thanks so much. So our next question is, if you could interview anyone throughout history, whether they be dead or alive, who would you choose?
The person that comes to my mind is Gandhi. Um, Not just because of what he did for India, but the way he did it. I thought he was a brilliant strategist and a tactician who was able not only to unite a very divided country, but to also sway and garner global support by positioning the message of satyagraha. Satyagraha is a very interesting term that he came up with. And basically, he used it to define his freedom struggle. And if you translate it literally, it translates to obstinate perseverance of truth.
That's really interesting. I never heard that before, and definitely a very worthy choice. So another question we have relates to the fact that development work in general often affords people the opportunity to get to experience new places and cultures. And we know that throughout your work, you've gotten to do that in different ways. So the question is, what is the most amazing place on earth?
So it's interesting because in a way, half my life has been growing up in India and half my life has been growing up here. What it has allowed me to do is to see very diametrically opposite cultures, socioeconomic constructions, and it has allowed me to kind of weigh one against another, not in a negative way, but to understand what are the similarities and what are the differences. And so for me, what the pluralism of India has, and as I grow away from it, it confounds me in a way. And on the other hand, the country that I call my own now, the youth and the vigor of this country, it kind of astounds me. And especially when you go from New York to New Mexico to now Indiana, where I have been, and I look at the diversity, it kind of reminds me of the diversity that I had experienced in India. So I'm not sure if there is one unique place. I just feel that places define themselves by the spirit that they emulate and the experiences that they create for you.
Wonderful. I think that's a common experience of people who are blessed to be able to do this kind of work, to recognize that there's more than just one aspect of something that makes a place great. We wanted to ask questions as well that kind of get into the rationale behind what you do and why you do it. So to start on that thread, we wanted to ask, what inspires you most?
I sit in a discipline that is ubiquitous. Design touches each and every discipline around the university. So for me, what is very important is to look at design through a couple of lenses: cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary, and interdisciplinary. And I'll give you a very small example. It was actually Ray who introduced me to this idea of systems thinking. And once I started reading about it, I of course started reading about it from a design point of view. But shortly after, I found that systems thinking appears in almost every discipline. So you can read Senge, who positions systems thinking in business. So one of the things that I find very exciting about my work is how it touches these various disciplines, but also at a more, the connections I've talked about are all academic. But it also touches the human aspect and the sociological aspect, and how design touches all those. That is what I find really inspiring in my work.
That's wonderful. So continuing on that thread, how did you first get involved in global development work, especially coming from the design field? And what have you done at the Pulte Institute in that regard?
So it was actually a chance meeting with Ray during my walk around the lake that, I got to know about the Pulte Institute. And then I started looking at the work that they were doing, and the conversations between Michael Schweiker and Ray and myself started. And soon after, we started working with, through my class on visualization of data, we started working with, first we worked with Maria Rivero, and what we were looking at is migration in the Honduras and the factors that affected that particular issue, like perceptions of security, gender differences, age differences, and so on and so forth. The following year, we got involved with Frederick Rossi, and at that point, we were looking at Venezuela immigration crisis, American response, definitions of refugees versus migrants. What was, I think, what was interesting in these collaborations was, you have all this research, but how do you take your research and convert it into a story? How does it become, how do complex concepts become accessible to all? And when you try and take all your research and try and put it in a way where it is understood, complex concepts, when they are understood, it really makes a difference. And that's how I started working with the Pulte Institute.
That's a great story, and one that I myself did not know, so I'm glad to hear about that. Two final questions here related more to your work. What work or research have you done that you feel most passionate about?
So, because my basic area of research and teaching is social design, where we are using design as an instrument for instrumenting social equity, the two areas of research that I have been invested in these past 4.5 years has been working for the visually impaired girls in India, ages about 6 to 22. And more recently, I have been involved with looking at youth violence in South Bend. The whole idea is, again, to understand how do you tip the scales through design and design intervention that opportunities become equal for all. In the case of the visually impaired, the idea is how do you have them step out into the world feeling that they are as capable, if not more, because, in some ways they are more capable, because some of their senses that we dull out are highly heightened. And therefore their capabilities are very, very interesting, because they use a compensatory way of coping with the world. On the more local side, I think I'm looking at the social fabric. Even though we work in Notre Dame, we are a part of the community. How then do we look at the social fabric, and how do we, look at areas which are fraying? And youth violence has caused a lot of fraying.
All right, fantastic. It's good to see that our work is reflected both globally and locally. That's something that I know we've had a focus on recently. So our final question here is one that I think is very important for the work we do here at the Keough School. And that is, what advice would you give to students who want to make a difference in the world?
So the first thing is, you have to have passion. You have to have the fire in the belly for whatever you do, whatever you choose to do. Your investment is very, very important. And secondly, design is a powerful discipline. It is a really powerful discipline. And therefore, if you want to make a difference, you have to step outside of yourself and embrace otherness. Because to be able to understand how someone else lives or what their experiences are, it is extremely important to embrace otherness. And the first step to making a difference is to embrace plurality. And because that is what really defines the world around us.
Well, thank you, Neeta, so much for joining us. And to find more out about her work, please see the links that we provided here, where you can get connected with the work that she's doing and learn more about her research. Thank you.